Hello and welcome to Pop Culture Yearbook. On this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. This is 2009. I'm Brad.
I'm Pete.
And we are very excited for this series of episodes coming up here in June. It's kind of like, in the 80s, there were all those special episodes like that you had to watch because they were really important and taught a lesson. This is going to be a special set of episodes because we have a very special guest. And if you are a true fan of this show, you might know him and remember his voice even from a previous incarnation. So Dave is our guest, and he is integral to this show, whether he's on it or not. He's actually kind of the brainchild of the whole thing. So Dave, you're joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this year and why you're here?
Yeah, well, that was quite the setup, Brad. I feel like I'm.
No,
I got to live up to
right
like.
off the top of my head there.
I wouldn't expect any lessons though.
Yeah, no lessons, but
No,
I feel like I've got to live up to the Family Ties episode where Tom Hanks was the drunk uncle,
exactly,
and was drinking like maraschino cherry juice and everything. So I hope I can give that level of daytime Emmy performance on this series here. So, yeah. So when we talked, you'd mentioned 2009 being a possibility, and back when we were originally talking about all this, I think I had sent out a text at one point just saying, when we do 2009, I'd like to pick something that didn't necessarily come out in that year, but is really important to me and that I discovered in that year. We'll get to the choices, so I'll kind of lay that out.
And I should have said too that so we're kind of breaking from the formula just a little bit because everything from this month you chose instead of each of us having our own thing, and everything you picked isn't necessarily from that exact year, but you're getting to all that. So that's the big change we have in store this month.
And we broke format a little bit, kind of going back old school in that one is full on sports. So
true,
so why don't I get into 2009? I'll kind of explain. I think if I kind of lay out what that year was for me, because it was a very weird up and down year. And I have reasons for the different things that I chose and kind of what they meant to me at that time. And so for me, 2009 was, I don't know how much in both of your guys' cases, the economic meltdown that was happening at that time affected you guys. And
I didn't even think
there was an economic meltdown.
Well, so this is right when so this is right when Obama is getting elected.
Knew it.
It's during the housing crisis. Well, and that's the thing is, if you want to just leave it at a surface level, I guess you could say thanks, Obama. Personally, I did say
not
thanks,
a political
Obama.
show here.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that for me, I was somebody that I was working. I had a 6-month-old daughter at home. I had made a jump, a career change, and in 2009, she was about a year and a half old, and I left the job I was in. It was a sales job at a video game company, and so I was out of work, hoping that I would land somewhere quickly, and it didn't go well for a little while. So in 2009,
But you left your job voluntarily, you said, right?
Well, it was
hard to find a new job. That was the issue.
It was not yes and no. It was complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it was a complicated situation. It was no George Costanza dipping my feet in the freezer of, in the ice cream cooler or anything like that. But, it was a situation where we parted ways and I was relieved. I was relieved to be out of that job just because of the stress that was involved in it. But I was also then more stressed because of being out of work. So when I think about 2009, so that all happened when Sonia was about 4 months pregnant with Baylor, my second daughter. And so, I knew I was going to be out of work for a little bit, and I've always been good at planning for that kind of thing. So initially I wasn't it wasn't a huge stress point. But and then having a newborn is another. All of a sudden we had 2 kids that were under the age of 2 in the house. Brad, you were the person who came over and babysat Kai Ming when we.
I remember staying at your house that night.
Oh.
I got pulled over on the way home from there.
I think I remember hearing that too.
By the cops. I was driving home at 3:30 in the morning and just got it was not. I'm the one car on the road, right? They just pulled me over fishing to see if I was drunk, and I wasn't. But yeah, it was an interesting year in that way, of very up and down. I'm very thankful when I look back on that year because I got so much good bonding time with Kai Ming. We would go to the Mall of America and walk around during the winter. We would go out to the Minnesota Zoo all the time. So in a lot of ways, it was great. For part of what wasn't working in my previous job is I was on the road all the time, and it was Jim Croce, Cats in the Cradle, or is it?
That's not right, is it?
You know what? Paul F. Tompkins made a joke one time about that, and dang it, I picked the wrong guy.
It's Ugly Kid Joe. That's who it is.
Yeah, well, Ugly Kid Joe, who I saw in concert.
I actually heard that the other day on the radio. Cats in the Cradle is Harry Chapin.
Harry Chapin, yeah.
Harry Chapin.
So I was, I was feeling those blues a lot during that year. As much fun as that job could be at times, I just felt like I wasn't being present at home, like doing the things that I always envisioned myself being as a dad. Anyway, but then the other 2 crazy things that year, so that was also the year, and Brad, you probably remember this a little bit, but so during that time, it all probably would have went fine, except for the fact that we then all of a sudden had like a house crisis where our sunroom in our house, based on an engineering thing, almost fell off our house.
Oh, yeah.
So we ended up having to like go through like a crazy amount of repairs. So a lot of the safety net I had kind of built up, I was just like, oh my God, it's all going away. And so that was kind of crazy. And this is the year before, basically I found out at Christmas that year, my parents were up for Christmas. They were going to Arizona after. And when my dad drove back up to Moorhead before they went back out to Arizona, that's when he found out he had pulmonary fibrosis. And, it was right after, it was in late April the next year that, he passed away. So
what a year.
Well, that's the thing is when I think about this year, now that being said, again, I think about all the bonding time I had with Kai Ming. I think about Baylor being born and just how, like, there's so much, as much stress that was going on. I look back at that time and I'm so thankful for everything that was there. And so we'll talk about the things that I chose, but I do feel like when you're when you're a parent of young kids like that, I do think too, you get a little, kind of unmoored from the regular world, right? Like you're not sleeping well. You're not like, I remember the year Kai Ming was born, I went to like 3 movies that year and 2 of them were The Dark Knight. And, and the year before that, I went and saw everything that came out. And so my life was very different. And I feel like the picks that I'm making here are going to be like the reasons for them and what they are going to be a little different too. So that'd be 2009 for me.
And it's a fun list.
Yeah.
Mine was very different than yours. Pete, do you want to go next or?
I can go next.
Go ahead, Pete. I'll go last.
So I was in a job. So we had recently had our firstborn son. And so I was kind of in a boat of where I had a job, wasn't really super happy in the job, but I couldn't just quit because I did have a newborn son and, we're trying to pay for our house and all of that kind of stuff. So, but one of the things about that job, and I didn't really get along super well with my boss at the time, but she did say in this year, because we were doing, I worked for a major retailer, and so we had stores all over the country, and we were doing like retrofitting of some of the stores. She said, we need to split up our team and we need to travel to these stores and do like a 2-hour store visit, but you got to travel all the way to the store. There's like 4 of them around the country, and we've got like 3 or 4 people on a team, so we're going to split it up. And she came to me and she goes, Brian, you get to pick. I want you to pick or have first choice of where you'd like to go. And if you want to make a vacation out of it or whatever. And this was on a Friday. Okay. So I'm like, oh, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I take the list. I go home to Jenny for the weekend and we look at it. And on the list was Vermont. It'd be like, gee, wouldn't it be that would be a nice place, a nice part of the country to go see.
You'd stay at the Stratford Inn.
There you go. So we decided we were going to go to Vermont. And so I go back to her on Monday, like first thing in the morning, say, hey, you know what? We've decided we're going to go to Vermont, and we are going to make a vacation out of it and everything. So she goes, oh, do you know what? I've decided I'm going to Vermont instead, and the other people have already picked. So it's already been decided. You're going to Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Oh, that's when you went to Las Cruces.
So yes, we did
that
go.
Fits in well with our last
I was going to say
that month, though.
That fits.
Yes.
Hint.
But so not the most beautiful part of the country, but we did go.
Actually, I think it is a beautiful part of the country. I love it.
It can be.
It's back then. It was in the news a lot, like all the time, because it's right across from Juarez, Mexico, and that's where like all this crime and everything was taking place.
I'm sure there's a lot of crime.
Yeah, and well, in fact, while we were there at the store, after I'd finished up what I was doing and everything, and kind of walking out, I started asking some of the locals that worked at the store. I said, "Hey, can you recommend any any fun things to do around here?" And the first thing the guy says, whatever you do, don't go across the border into Juarez. You will be killed. Okay.
It's not right across the border, right? What? That's
is it a border
El Paso's right across the border.
It's El Paso. Actually, we were staying in El Paso, and Las Cruces was like a half-hour, 45-minute drive from there.
Because we drove through it on the way to El Paso, and I thought it was a little farther away than that. But that makes sense. That
actually is a good clarification. We stayed in El Paso. There weren't that many good hotels in Las Cruces itself, and so that's what we did. But what we did, because we had our rented car, we drove all the way across the state of Texas, and so we wound up staying in Galveston, which is if you think of Texas, it has the extreme ends on both sides. That's where we drove from end to end. And it was a lot of fun. The highlight of that
that's like farther than driving from New York to Chicago.
It is. I know. But
fun fact.
It was fun because the highlight of the trip was probably when we stopped in San Antonio, and it's actually a really beautiful city. And we
always wanted to go there. We're going to do it someday.
Yeah. What's amazing about that city is that they've got this river walk, which it's like in the middle of the city. And it's on a lower level. And to get there, you can be walking on, a busy city street and everything. You go down this escalator and you can't really even see it from above very well. You don't know that it's there. But then now you're in this lower level. And I likened it to being almost like in Super Mario Brothers, right? Where you just down this lower level and now there's a whole different world. And it's like all these restaurants and you could.
Well, you sold me.
A boat ride.
Crabs that you got to punch
twice
to kick off the thing. And
Can you take a pipe to get down there?
Yeah, that's what they should do.
But you were close enough. You should have gone to Carlsbad Caverns. That would have been a good spot from...
Oh, yeah, we didn't do that.
That was such an awesome place.
Yeah.
And you're not down there very often, so it's like if you're there, you'd want to go if you could.
Can I ask you real quick on that with San Antonio? So I know Brad, you'd mentioned the first time you flew in one of the last episodes, right?
Thanks for listening, Dave.
Well, hey, Dave, gotta represent. And so in my first flight I ever took, I was 16. We went down to see Jenny. She was at Fort Sam Houston down there in the Army. And so we went down to visit her, and we were in San Antonio, and Mandy and we were constantly joking about wanting to see the Alamo because of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right?
Right.
And for whatever reason, in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I feel like when they filmed the Alamo, and in my head, the Alamo was always like this fort that's out in the middle of nowhere. Did you go to the Alamo?
We did, and it's right in the middle of the city. You're right.
Yeah,
it's like,
I found that so disorienting.
I knew that for a long time ago, so I know if I ever see it, it's going to be like right in the middle of the city. But
and when you go in it, it's like way smaller than I would have expected too.
Yeah,
it's,
and no basement either. So
right, no basement. I kept asking the basement
for all you Pee-wee fans.
But then we kept going, and we did go to Galveston, and we were there in November. But we were thinking, well, this is like a spring break place. I mean, they got beaches, it's on the Gulf, and everything. But it was just there. A hurricane had just gone through, or it was like passing through, or whatever, and it was like really cold and windy the entire time. And there was literally nobody else staying at the resort that we stayed at. So, but it is what it is.
That is a lot of driving. Did you go back to Las Cruces to go home, or did you fly from somewhere else?
We flew out of Houston, which is close to Galveston.
Yeah.
So, we flew into El Paso, and then drove all the way across and flew back home out of Houston. So that's kind of how we did it. But it was a fun trip. It was good to see that. We enjoy seeing different parts of the country that we hadn't been to before. I love long road trips, and so it was fun. So that's my memory.
You're done?
I'm done. That's fine.
All right. Well, this was a really nice year. Like, so you mentioned, Dave, spending time like with your daughter, and this was a year. So I'm a teacher, and the way that you get paid more is you have to take classes and get to a level, and you get your master's, and you need to take more classes. This is the year where I like took all my classes and got to the farthest end of the scale, and then it just goes up every year from there. But I got and that was such a great feeling. I can still remember when I finished my last class. It was an online, like a take it home class, and I packing it up to send it back, and I'm like, what a good feeling that was. And I got friends my age that still haven't even finished that, like 12 years later. I'm like, what? It's just money you're just not taking, and it's crazy. But then along with that, this was a nice year because when we had our first kid in 2006, I started working not quite full time. I was 0.8. And that was because I would work in the morning and I would get home at 1 o'clock, and my wife would then work at 2 o'clock until like 10. And so we were able to like juggle back and forth. So we'd never see each other, but we didn't have daycare. And so for 3 years, I worked that schedule, and it was awesome to be done at 1 o'clock and leave every day. And then I got to hang out with my kids a ton. And so we had our second kid in 2008. So now I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old this year. So it was a lot of fun. Most of my time was spent with them. My son started preschool that year, and the cutest thing ever. So he was in a speech class because he's been in speech since he was 2 for his whole life. But so he took a bus actually as a 3-year-old to the school where he took his speech class for preschool. And it was this little, short bus, but it came right to your front of your driveway, and you go out there and there's these nice people on there meeting you, and they've got little kid music playing in the bus. And he'd get on there, and he was always the best, and he would just smile and wave, and he was never nervous about it, and he was just the greatest. And so that was like this big thing. We're all nerd. You put your 3-year-old on a bus, but it was great.
Yeah.
We went to Arizona for the 3rd year in a row that year. That was our trip. So we had gone there with our friends who had the parents lived there. And so we went there for 3 years in a row for a spring break trip. And this was the last time we did that. And then the other memory I have of this year, my last one, is this is the year where I really started getting into running a lot and 5Ks. So I'd started running like around 30 years old or so, but it was just for exercise. And then I ran my first 5K. We all went up to Fargo in 2007 for the first time.
That was the year. So 2009 is the year we had the blue shirts.
Yes.
I still have a picture of me, you, Mark, and Kurt. It's hanging up in our kitchen of the four of us at that one.
So this was the third Fargo event, but I didn't go in 2008. I don't remember why. So it's my second time going up there, and so I had run a 5K, but then I ran this one. I felt really good. It was awesome, and I decided I'm going to run a half marathon the next year. And so then from there, and for like 10 straight years, I ran either a half marathon or a full marathon, and that's all I was doing. I was like Forrest Gump. I was just running.
Never
And this
stop.
is the year where that really like took off, and most of that I actually owe to you, because you set us up to go to Fargo, and that was our like a first official event that we did up there, and that led to all the other events that I entered, mostly in Fargo, but other ones too.
I think that's the year we did the karaoke night.
Actually, no, because I ran that was in 2011, because I ran
Was
my
that
first
11?
marathon that day, and I was all energized, and I felt so good. I went up and I did the karaoke, and so.
Yes. Okay. I couldn't remember because I know those first couple of years when we were doing 5Ks, more people were coming up.
Yeah, at first it was a pretty good group.
And then it kind of dwindled down.
And eventually it just was the three of us right here on this call.
And sometimes we'd go grocery shopping. Iconic pictures would be snapped.
Just saw a picture of that the other day.
Yes, it came up. It pops up on my news feed every year.
I love it.
I know, because you always send it out.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
So that was my memory.
Take those memories.
So it was really like you mentioned the crisis of the economic crisis, and it didn't even cross my mind, because I've always been very lucky. I'm a lucky person, and like we were fine. Like I was a teacher, so I had a good steady job, and I was actually not even working as much at that time, and I was able to the good thing is we didn't have to spend $1 million on daycare. Maybe it caused some stress, between me and my wife, just because we didn't get to see each other very often. But it was all worth it, and it was all great. So.
Well, I was kind of curious about you, Pete, because I know that had to be around the time you made your transition to your current job, right?
Yeah, you guys had those.
That was a couple of years later. That was a couple of years later.
Okay.
Because when I transitioned to my current company, that was 2012. And so it was like 3 years later. But this was the year that they had actually offered voluntary layoffs, and I wanted to take it so bad, and my wife talked me out of it. What that meant was that it was like a game show, right? Where they were offering you could quit and you'd get 7.5 months pay, or you could wait another month, and if you get laid off, then involuntarily, then it's 6 months pay. Then it's 6 months. So it's like, but then you cannot.
But you might not get laid off at all.
Right. Or you might not get laid off at all, which I would have been stuck in a job that I hated, but which I was,
and I knew a lot of people that were going through that, because that was the place I had just left a year before. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you're a teacher like me.
Yep. Hey, I might be getting some good news early this week. So.
Oh, wow.
About staying on at the place I'm at. So.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
All right. So should we move on here?
Yeah. So I can jump into the 3 picks, and then so do you want me to do that? I'll just jump into the 3 things that I picked.
Okay, one of this. We're going to be doing our music picks in this episode, because it kind of is left over from the other ones. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. But why don't you go ahead and give a little sneak preview?
Right. So as we release the parts, obviously you guys typically go with albums, a TV show, or movie. And I've got 2 of those 3, but I don't have a music choice. So which is why we're going to discuss music tonight. So the 3 things that I chose, and again, they're all kind of representative of different things. So the first one I'll talk about is it's The Room. And The Room came out, I believe, in 2003, but we're going to talk about it because I discovered it in 2009. And to me, this is very indicative of kind of what was going on for me when it came to movie watching, just in general. At this time, I worked in, I had some jobs that were, related to the movie industry. So I was coming off of years where I saw almost everything that came out. You know, I would be going to movies constantly for work. I'd be going to movies constantly on my own. I just was a huge movie fan. And then that came to a screeching halt once I had kids. I wasn't going to the movies as much. But I was still trying to like consume a lot of stuff, but it was just at home through, you know, Netflix by mail was a big one and all that. And well, and so one of the things for me, because I always have kind of like when it comes to movies, I just can't get enough. I do part of what I do like to enjoy are I do like kind of cult films and films that kind of fit that they're so good at they're so bad it's good kind of thing, right? And I know that that's not everybody's cup of tea and all that. And well, but even in that genre, and it's funny because, you know, for our homework on this one, for The Room, if I look back at a lot of the movies I would put on the list of like what would be fun to check out for those, the rewatchability of a lot of these other movies is not anything near what The Room is. And so that's the thing is I read this article in Entertainment Weekly that year that was all about the cult of The Room, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I got to watch this. And so I remember I got it on Netflix by mail. And it's, you know, we'll talk about it when we get to it. It's a bit of a rough watch at the beginning, right? But once it gets rolling, you're just like, I can't even believe.
Once he hits that flower shop.
Yeah, hi doggy. And that's the thing is once that all kicks in, I remember, you know, texting people and just being like, dear God, I have a movie that we have to all watch together. And it really has, like, for me with this one, you know, we'll talk about it more in that episode, but it's something that's really stuck with me over the years, but it was kind of born in this year. And
it's important to all of us because
and we did talk about the Fargo trip earlier, and that was when you exposed me to this.
Was that your first time?
Was that your first time watching that?
You didn't go to one of the midnight showings?
Not before that. I had midnight showings since then.
I will also say
I remember the time we watched it up in Fargo. Was that the same one where we also watched Teen Wolf one night?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, that was the same weekend.
Yeah. That was fun.
Speaking of those kind of movies, the other great one, because they're not all that rewatchable. That's the thing. You know, you're gonna get sick of them. But one that you showed us that we love too was Birdemic. Right. And I was listening to a podcast the other day about The Room, and I was so impressed because they brought up and said maybe we should do Birdemic. I thought these guys are like our spirit animals. This is great because I mean I've never heard anybody mention Birdemic before, and so
and I know we'll talk about it in there. Like we'll talk about movies from that year. One of the things I'm going to put together is just kind of a short list of, you know, if you like things like Mystery Science Theater and stuff like, you know, if there's one time when we all went to it at that theater, that Regal over in Eagan.
Giving it away. That's going to be my favorite showing.
Oh, where it was laugh tracks. Yeah. Well,
we'll get to that.
And so, so anyway, but I'll have kind of like a short list of, you know, and all because the problem with that genre is it can really test your patience, right? You could be sitting through something that somebody tells you is pretty funny and it's just straight garbage. And you're like, well, when is this going to, like, it is just ridiculous. When's it going to get good? Just right. And that's the thing is I've got like a short list of a few that I think are like complete home runs. But even in that short list, they're home runs watching them once, maybe twice, but not in the way that The Room is. I mean, I could watch The Room every night this week and not get tired of it. And, you know,
it's like, I don't know, but you got to skip that first 20 minutes maybe. Then I could agree.
Well, and that's, the sex scenes are rough, but yeah. So.
What else are we going to talk about, Dave?
Yeah, don't give away all the material. Yeah,
I know. Well, come on, we're gonna have plenty to say about The Room. So that was why I chose that one. So again, it's not a 2009 release, but I can trace it back to an article that I read in Entertainment Weekly in 2009. So the next one I'll bring up, and for me, you know, again, this kind of speaks to the disjointed nature of, I feel like in the last handful of years, anywhere you go and you start talking about pop culture with people, it's hit or miss whether or not people have seen the same things you have, right? Like you've either been into that show or you've not. There's so many things. Yeah, there's so many things out there. So I do find that interesting. And this is another show. So this was in its second year in 2009. I discovered it again because of an Entertainment Weekly article. Stephen King did like a guest column where he basically called this the best show he's ever seen, you know, for you know, to paraphrase it. And it was Breaking Bad. And Breaking Bad is right up there with the all-time, you know, shows that I've watched. But what I thought would be interesting about that, because, you know, I'm sure there's shows that you guys have watched. Like Pete, I think you've watched The Americans. I've always wanted to watch The Americans.
We both watched The Americans.
Okay, and then Brad, I know you were a Lost fan. I don't know, Pete, but I've never. So those are two shows I've never watched, right? And so if you guys were to pick that for this, it would be, you know, I'd think like, okay, well, you know, it's so what I think is interesting. So Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, you have not watched Breaking Bad as a series, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But because of watching it, I've watched a couple of episodes now of this one in preparation for the show, and I'm starting to get hooked on it. And I probably will.
Yeah.
So the one that I picked though, did you watch that without seeing anything else?
I did watch the very first episode first.
Okay.
Because I wanted to get the little, you know, the character establishment and who everybody is, just kind of what's going on. But you're right.
Exposition, Pete.
Oh, okay. Well, lucky duh.
Well, and here's why I asked you, Pete, is that so what I picked was in the last season, the 5th episode, which is called Dead Freight. And the reason that I picked this, and I'll be really interested to hear what you have to say about it, because even though it's really late in the series, without getting into too much detail, I felt like that one specific episode kind of sets up almost like a heist episode, like a heist movie.
Oh, it's fantastic.
So that even if you were cold to the show, there's specific things in that
right away episode. What they're trying to do, and then and it's all about that heist.
So I'll be curious to know, like, as somebody who hadn't seen the series, what did you think of that specific one? It's not my favorite episode of the series, but I do like, it's definitely top 5, and there's reasons why there are things that they put into that relate to other things that are like my favorite moments in the overall series. So that's what we're going to be talking for.
Just to show how good that show is. So I've watched it before, and then so I was going to watch that episode, and then I've said, well, maybe I'll watch like a couple from season again too. I started the whole series over a month ago, and I have 8 episodes left. I'm going to watch the entire series again before we do our recording. I can't stop watching it. It's that good. It may probably better the second time.
I just got through it. So, and I got to say,
it's been a real joy.
My opinion on Skyler still hasn't changed. So, but yeah, so that's pick number 2, and then pick number 3, and this has
Stepping out of the box here.
What's that?
Stepping out of the box here.
Yeah. Well, so this has to do everything within the moment of that year. And so I'm picking the 2009 Vikings, and, you know, really, I have to say, like with The Room, one of the things I would say about The Room is there were just factors that went into that will make it kind of a one-of-a-kind type experience. You know, and we'll get into more, but to me, the 2009 Vikings is a sports experience that there's no way that that'll ever get replicated for us. And, you know, and
I don't know, Aaron Rodgers wants out.
But we can talk about it during that episode. Aaron Rodgers coming here now and at the age I'm at, even if they won a Super Bowl, it will not stack up to the way I felt about sports in my life at that time, like what my history with Favre was. So that's the thing is, and for anybody that's not familiar, the 2009 Vikings, that was the year Brett Favre came to us, and it'd be like Michael Jordan going to the Knicks and winning and taking them to the finals or whatever. If you were a Knicks fan, I mean, it was
throwing the ball out of bounds with 2 seconds to go.
Right, and doing a Chris Webber call a timeout when you don't have any kind of thing. So that's the thing is, like, to me, and again, because of what that year was for me, of like all these highs and lows, to me, like, so much of what the Vikings were that year can be summed up in like what my life was at that time. And so I think it'll just be really fun to, kind of walk through that and then have just a broader discussion around, I mean, you guys talk all the time about, we're three guys that grew up in Minnesota, and, we kind of like, we're homegrown to this area. The Vikings have always been important to all three of us. I think it'll just be a really fun discussion, as a broader discussion, just of like, what's it like to be a Minnesota sports fan,
and we might end up crying by the time we're done.
Well, dude. Well,
and if you're a fan of like the Jets or I don't know who else, you can listen to that episode and feel the same pain. The Browns, let's say, the Lions, pick a team.
Yeah.
Your pain isn't as great as ours, but you can feel the same pain, and you can certainly listen in.
And I'll say this. I do think there is if you talk to, let's say, a Lions fan, as an example, their misery is a whole different kind of misery.
Yes.
Because their misery is they're the Poindexter that's gotten shoved into a locker every day of their high school career. We're like the guy who got set up for the elaborate prank to get pantsed at prom, right? Of like
18 times.
Yeah, well,
and never got.
You know what I mean? Like,
never got smart to it and just kept going to prom.
Yeah, we're Charlie Brown getting them.
Exactly, that's it.
Yes.
Like, one of those years that they did that was one of the memes that came out, was Charlie Brown wearing a Vikings uniform and up in the air after Lucy pulled the ball, and it's never summed up the Vikings fandom more than that. That was the best.
It's like, heck yeah, I'll believe in the team with Brett Favre coming back and playing at an MVP level. We already have Adrian. Jared Allen's a sack monster. Like, yeah, that team should be pretty good. I'll believe. Nope. And so we'll talk about that.
All right. It'll get ugly.
But it'll be fun.
It'll be fun. Oh, all three are going to be fun. But tonight we're going to do music just to wrap this up and to make sure we include one of our favorite topics that isn't quite fitting in anywhere else. So, Dave, do you want to go first or last, since you're like the special guest?
I mean, I can throw my list out first. So this is a year I have memories tied to some of these. It's a pretty underwhelming list for my top 5, and one of the ones is a band that would never make like a big list for me, other than it's 100% tied into memories with my kids. So if I go out to number 5 on mine, I picked I got 2 at 5. Pearl Jam's Backspacer came out that year. If you guys are familiar with The Fixer and Just Breathe.
I am familiar with The Fixer, and I got that on my list. So
both
not
the
album,
of those
songs.
Yeah, both of those are songs. Like, the album I don't remember much of outside of those 2 songs. But those 2 rank up, probably in close to my top 10 of all-time Pearl Jam songs, and I love, like, Pearl Jam's one of my favorite bands.
I agree. I would say The Fixer and Just Breathe would be my 2 favorite songs of theirs since mid-90s, by far.
Yep. And then this
I
is
couldn't name another song on the album, though. That's all I know.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. And I do know that this is one I own physically. What I will say with this next one that I tied at 5, this is indicative of the shifting nature of buying less and less physical stuff. So Coldplay had an album that year, and when I saw the name of the album, I was like, I didn't know that was named this. Left, Right, Left, Right, Left. And
yeah, it was like an EP or something that came out after Viva La Vida.
Well, so when I looked on the track list, at least on the thing I looked at, I was like, oh, this is the album that has Strawberry Swing and Viva La Vida and So is that not right?
Viva La Vida came out in 2008. This was like a, I don't know, a B-sides or a live. I'm not sure, but it was like a follow-up to the real album. So
got it. Okay. All right. Well, and I will say, so real quick, just as a funny aside, so one of the buyers that worked with me in one of my previous jobs, he was telling a story once about going to a Timberwolves game and talk about sad Minnesota sports. So this is back still when Kevin Garnett was with us, and or maybe it was right around, but anyway, it was at a time where they were still legitimate, and they lost a close game. And right at the, like, it was like the they lost a close game in the Target Center. The lights are coming up and they played Fix You. So he's like, when you try your best. And he's just like, boy, if there isn't a song that sums up that franchise more,
Right.
So, but number 4 for me would be the Black Eyed Peas. Their album that had things like Boom Boom Pow, I Got a Feeling. Wow. This is 100% my kids. Like, this is, and one thing I would say, like, so there's this guy out there, his name's DJ Earworm, and what he does is every year he puts out, so I think this might have been the first year he did it. He puts together a thing called the United States of Pop. So, like, at the time, if you were listening to like KDWB, which I would do in the car when when my daughter was in the car with me, they would play this. And what he does is he takes all the biggest hits of the year and he kind of knits them all together, and it's really cool. Number 3 for me would be Eminem's Relapse. It's one of the last, it's his first album after 2004's Encore, which I thought was his worst album. And it's not quite as good as the next year when Recovery came out, but Relapse is still pretty good. And it was nice to see him rebound because his album previous to that was pretty brutal. I do have the Foo Fighters at 2. Their greatest hits album had 2 new songs on it, Wheels and Word Forward. But, and this goes back to a previous episode, guys, this is where it all began. Incredibad by The Lonely Island came out this year. There is a huge separation between number 1 and everyone else.
Wait, so this I didn't even include the Foo Fighters on this because I never cared for that greatest hits
album, and it's whatever. But yeah, this had I'm on a Boat, Dick in a Box, Jizz in My Pants. All the classics are there, boys. So,
that's fitting. Yeah. Fitting for you.
Yes.
I'll go next, and then because Pete usually kind of wraps us up.
Okay.
So I found, or what you gonna say?
No, I just said okay.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
I found one that's like it's an honorable mention, but it's not like I actually liked it. But did you know that Sugar Ray had an album that year, and it was called Music for Cougars?
Cougars, yeah, I did see that.
I just thought that was funny, and I thought they really know their audience, so I just wanted to give a shout out for that.
Yep.
For number 5, I only had 4 albums. I just listed some songs that were from that year that I know I really, really liked. And so one of the songs I actually heard for the first time ever on the way to that Fargo marathon. Like, I can remember it because we had a new car and we had satellite radio for like whatever 3 or 6 months. But it's called, the band is Band of Skulls, and they have a song called I Know What I Am, and it's awesome. And I actually just listened to it the other day, and they've got a couple really good songs. And then I had those 2 Pearl Jam songs down because I didn't really know the album. And then same thing as that, Weezer had an album that year, which I never listened to, but they had 3 songs that I really liked. If you're wondering if I Want You to, The Girl Got Hot, and I'm Your Daddy. All 3 of those songs were on my running list. They were great songs to just go run to.
So I would say Can't Stop Partying on that album is in my top 5 for Weezer.
I actually don't even know that one. I just listened to those 3 over and over again. And this is the year Taylor Swift put out You Belong With Me. And we are huge Taylor Swift fans in this house.
Never shuts up about Taylor Swift.
That's a Swiftie.
And then this is where I started making a lot of running lists. So like I said, those Weezer songs were a big part of that, and just a lot of other ones. But so I started making a lot of playlists. That was becoming what you do more and more. My albums, number 4, I had U2, No Line on the Horizon, which I actually went and saw them in concert for the first time after this album came out. I wasn't a huge fan of this album, but the more I listen, it actually is better than I thought. It took a few listens, and I didn't give it a lot of tries, but there's some really good songs on there. and the concert was awesome because I hadn't seen him before. Number 3, Pete Yorn, one of my favorites, and Scarlett Johansson put out a album called Breakup where they did duets, which was just weird because I love Pete Yorn. This was like his 5th album, and Scarlett Johansson was like, a big actress by this time. It's like, what the heck are these two doing together? And she sings, and it's pretty good. And then number 2 was Pete Yorn. He had his own album that year. It's called Back and Forth, and it was his 4th album, and I loved it. We listened to it over and over again. And then number 1, this was an easy choice for me, is Green Day. 21st Century Breakdown came out that year, and that's their first album since American Idiot, which was the greatest thing ever. And this album, and not everybody loves it, but I love it. I think it's great. It's long, and it has maybe 2 or 3 too many songs on it, but there are some really classic, awesome songs on there. And they didn't have a lot of big hits, but I don't know. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great follow-up to American Idiot. And after 5 years of waiting, it was pretty awesome. So, and if you know me, I'm a huge, huge fan of Green Day. So,
as am I. And that's kind of a good transition, unless you had anything.
No, I'm all done. Go ahead.
Was that not the album that had 21 Guns and Know Your Enemy?
That was the big. Those
are the good hits. And I think both of those songs were in the American Idiot Broadway production that was out that we saw. 21 Guns was for sure, and I think that Know Your Enemy
was in it.
I thought it was. We'll have to look that up, but I was pretty sure that was also included in it.
I've seen that play twice.
Okay. I saw it once, and it
was
on
Broadway in New York,
in Minneapolis.
Oh, that was cool.
It was fantastic. If it ever came back, I would love to go see it again because it was a lot of fun. It was a birthday present that Jenny had got for me. It was tickets to this, and so we went to it, and it was amazing. Dave, I also had I Got a Feeling by Black Eyed Peas and Boom Boom Pow. I put those together because this was when I was also in running. I've run a couple of marathons myself, and I had Black Eyed Peas on my running list.
I will just say, if I had a top 5 of my most hated things of all time, Black Eyed Peas might be on it. So,
would that be before or after Dave?
They're very grating. Oh, come on.
I'm just kidding. So then I also had Foo Fighters because that album is great. It had the new songs on it. There's a couple of country ones I had on here too because my wife listens to country all the time, and
always with the country.
Oh, hey, she. Anytime I'm in the car with her, that's what we have to listen to, and but I do really like the Zac Brown Band because and they came out with the Whatever It Is that year. Now Zac Brown Band, a lot of the new country I hate just because all music is because it's just not authentic. It's like bubblegum music. It's manufactured. But I do think that the Zac Brown Band, I think that they are more authentic than.
I've heard pretty good things about them.
I actually saw them live.
I enjoyed them
in the same year because the last company I worked for when I was in sales, they played our sales meeting. And then the buyer that I was calling on got them to play at their charity event that year. So I saw them twice. It's not my thing. It's not the kind of music I would normally listen to, but they were very fun to watch live.
I did have their first album. That was the one that had Toes in the Water.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that song to me is very Jimmy Buffett-ish, which is so not my vibe.
It's still good though, and there's the Chicken Fry. It's also a good song. That's not from that year, but and
that's
still,
the thing. And even if you don't like those songs, that they're as a live show, they're awesome. They are really good.
Maybe you guys should just go do a podcast on Zac Brown Band.
Wow. I didn't know that we were supposed to include only certain genres on this.
Oh, it's a joke. I love it. I love that Dave knows them too.
I'm going to email Adam Scott to see if he's available to talk about Zac Brown Band with me.
Who?
Adam Scott and Scott Ackerman. So.
Oh yes, for their next.
Yeah. Are you Zac Brown here?
Now, Dave,
talking Zac Brown to me.
Dave, you also threw out that some of the reasons you had some songs on your list because like the memories they create with your kids, right?
Absolutely, yes. Yep.
Yeah, that one is. This is the year that Beyonce came out with "Single Ladies," and that's the one that Jolie, my daughter, just absolutely loved, and she would. That's what got her into dancing, which is what she does as a thing now. And in fact,
that video is crazy.
Yeah,
that video is awesome. Do you know in that video one of the dancers that's with her? I believe it's for sure one. It might even be both of them are men.
Yeah,
they look like women, but it's the one of them for sure is a man. I know that.
Glad I'm not on the dating scene anymore.
so yeah, but I love that video. I love that video.
The other one too, for the same reason, Jolie is also into Poker Face by Lady Gaga, which came out that year. That was she kind of blew up. I mean, she was known and big before that, I think, but that was what like really pushed her over the top, if I'm not mistaken. And I actually saw her in person because of the company that I used to work for. You know, I worked on a floor where a lot of celebrities were making deals and everything like that, and she was one of them. I saw a number of other ones too, but she is tiny. She's really, really. She can't be more than 4'6" I don't think. I mean,
who are you talking about?
Lady Gaga.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Beyonce for some reason.
Beyonce, I'm pretty sure is taller than that.
That's what I thought. She's not short.
No, Lady Gaga. But by the same reason, I saw Snoop Dogg. This might have been that same year too, but Snoop Dogg actually walked by, and he is like really tall, as you would expect, right? But anyway, so that kind of rounds out my list. I had a couple of others written down, but we don't need to go into. But that's pretty much what I got. Anybody have anything else to add?
No, I'm just really excited for what's coming up.
This is going to be
me too.
All right, we will wrap up this episode. Thank you all for listening. We will close it out with a little bit of Preacher Row for you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your song is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. And start to me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared but there's nothing I can do.